Hey people, it's early hours of the morning. I've just finished watching the second US presidential debate, finished about half an hour ago. It's 4:30 in the UK. This debate finished about an hour ago in Hempstead, New York, between President Obama and former Governor Mitt Romney. Now, I won't call this video second presidential debate because I didn't actually make a video about the first presidential debate. So I'm just going to give an overview of the presidential debate, just for the sake of neatness, consistency, and so on. I'll try and summarise some of the things I thought about in this debate. Obviously, I won't have time to comment on everything. Who won? Well, it's very, very hard sometimes to tell in the immediacy of a debate who won, so to speak. But I do think this was a bit more 50-50 than the first time around when Obama came across as a bit complacent. Firstly, if I was an American, I would be more swayed towards Obama. I don't think he's an outstanding president, but I think I'd rate him maybe a 6 out of 10, strong 5 out of 10. I believe he's better than Romney, but that's just an outside perspective. I'd like to just raise some of the issues that were brought up in the questions, because this was a town hall format, interesting format. I think Candy Crowley done a great job. She moderated very well. So some of the issues that were brought up. Firstly, there was a question about women's pay. Someone raised the issue that women in America are still on average paid only 75% of what men are paid. This is a valid question, and it's a fair point. In this regard, women obviously, arguably, do get a raw deal. So that was a very valid question. Although I would raise some issues around that. That's a valid question about egalitarianism in regards to pay, but can you ever envisage a question being asked to presidential candidates about the bias towards women in child custody cases and the fact that men clearly get a raw deal in that regard? No, it wouldn't be asked. And I do think there's a tendency, whatever the reality of the actual positions, there's a tendency for mainstream male politicians to pander to populism about wanting to appeal to be on the side of women. This in itself is problematic because there's this assumption that all women think the same. Now, there's roughly 150 million women in America, roughly speaking. Some of them are going to be Republicans, some are Democrats. I think at the moment there's more Democrats. But not every woman thinks the same. In the same way you cannot generalise all African Americans or all Hispanics and so on. There's going to be trends. For example, generally, more women tend to favour Obama, more Hispanics favour Obama, more black Americans favour Obama. So there's trends, but you can't say that all women think the same. So I think when you talk about women voters, it's slightly misleading because that goes under the assumption that all women think the same, and they don't. So I think that's an important issue to raise. Gun control, that's a huge issue in America, and one I actually have very strong views on. In fact, that's something I'm going to make other videos on, but for the purpose of time management, in this video I'll just say I think both candidates gave the impression they were trying to skim over the issue. Obama gave a somewhat stronger response, but I didn't like the fact he opened on the Second Amendment, the precious Second Amendment. And he raised an important point, for example, about Chicago having a big problem with violence from cheap handguns, and about how the law needs to be enforced and so on. They're important points, but I still got the impression the president was trying to move on quickly to the next question, when the issue of gun violence, in my opinion, is a very, very important issue in America. And far too often it isn't brought up. I'm pleased it was brought up tonight, but I wasn't very happy with the responses. And looking on Facebook at groups like the Brady Campaign and other groups, they seem to share my disappointment that the issues weren't really addressed fully. Important points were raised, but I still got the impression Obama was trying to move on. Now Romney, I wasn't expecting much of an answer from Romney because he flip-flopped on the issue in the past, and he's very cosy with the NRA, so I wouldn't expect him to take a pro-gun control position. He said, sort of along the lines of similar to the president, that guns should stay out of the hands of criminals, but that really avoids a lot of the reality of the situation, which is current gun legislation is far too weak in America. That's just a fact. Obviously NRA people are going to disagree. They're going to say, oh, it's terrible, our rights are being stripped away, etc. The United States of America has the weakest gun controls in the democratic world, probably. And certainly gun homicide rates are substantially higher. There's major issues around that. And you can see that when you compare the rates of gun homicides in America to just about any other developed democratic country, whether that be Canada, Germany, the UK, Japan, even allowing for the population difference, the gun homicide rates in the United States are significantly higher. And there's no escaping that fact. It's just a cold, hard fact. Putting it into context, in the UK, on average, per year, there's less than 100 gun homicides. Okay? There's a higher rate of gun incidents than gun homicides, but the number of gun homicides in the UK don't even go into 3 figures. In Germany and Canada, it's a bit higher. In the United States of America, 9,000 plus per year. So it's a staggering rate, much, much higher. And that doesn't even include the number of suicides and accidents and so on. So clearly there's a huge problem in the States. In the last year alone, we've seen the Aurora massacre. We've seen the massacre in the Sikh temple in Milwaukee. Only recently, I think Minneapolis, there was a shooting. This year alone, there's been about 5 shooting sprees in America. Deadly shooting sprees. That's in 1 year. I'm not going to dwell too much on this in this video because, like I say, that's an issue I have strong views about. So I'll save that for other videos. About the trend of this election, my instinct is Obama will be re-elected, but with a hugely reduced support base. I predict it'll be a close election. And I think Romney has narrowed the gap in recent weeks with his debate performances. And as much as I dislike his politics, I think Romney has performed somewhat presidential. And I guess I give him credit for that. Again, the Ryan-Biden debate. Biden seemed to give pretty good answers, but he was pretty rude as well. And whatever your politics is, that doesn't look good with voters. And I can't actually stand Paul Ryan in some of his positions, but again, he was more polite. And with a lot of American voters, I think that doesn't go down too well. One thing I get frustrated with not only elections in the United States, elections in the UK as well, and elections in general in democracy, is that there's a tendency to sort of focus on groups of people, like what do young people want, what do women want, what do ethnic minorities want. I think that's misleading. I understand why they do it, because they want to see trends, but I think it's misleading because it brings about the assumption that everyone in that group will think the same. And that isn't the case. So maybe trends, but not every woman is going to think the same way. Not every African American is going to think the same way. Not every Jewish American is going to think the same way, and so on and so on. So I think that's misleading. Also, to my American viewers, I would make a point, and this is something I tend to notice with American presidential elections. I might be wrong about this, but this is purely an outside perspective. Try and remember that those candidates are ultimately human beings. I think there's a tendency for a lot of Americans, I'm not generalizing, but a lot of Americans tend to put candidates on a sort of superhuman pedestal. And to be fair, the candidates do that themselves. But you're never going to have a perfect president, ever. You cannot have, in the democratic world, in a democratic system, a president that will please everyone. That just won't happen. And you will have strong presidents, mediocre presidents, and weak presidents, but you'll never have a president who will get it right all the time. You have to remember they're human beings, they have frailties. No matter how strong a leader they are, how intelligent they are, etc., they're going to make mistakes. Now, if you're a hardcore Republican, obviously you're not going to support President Obama. I respect that. That's your democratic right. If you're a hardcore Democrat, you're maybe going to really, really defend Obama on a lot of issues, probably to the point of being sycophantic. If you're in the middle, you'll probably agree with me that, and I'm not in the middle, I am more swayed towards Obama because generally speaking his politics are more aligned to mine. Generally speaking, I'm not saying on every issue, but I sort of see Obama as centre-left president. I'm centrist / centre-left, so my politics are more closely aligned to Obama's, but I don't think he's been a wonderful president. I think he's been a decent president with some of the things he's had to face. Not an outstanding president, but I don't think, and by the way, I never, even though I was very interested in him in 2008, I was never of the view that he's going to be a perfect president. And I remember back then he actually, his camp tried to tone down expectations because they were concerned that people were hyping him up too much. And you know, you're never going to have a president who gets it absolutely perfect. A lot of the Republicans are comparing Obama to the Carter years. Whether that's fair or not, I think we'll only be able to tell in retrospect. I think, from my knowledge of American politics, Obama at this stage of his presidency doesn't seem to be as strong as Bill Clinton at the end of his first term, whereby Clinton was riding pretty high approval rates, and he performed very well in the debates. So if Obama does get a second term, it will be not a very strong mandate. I think he will win. That's my instinct at this stage. I predict a victory. I'm not going to go into the business of predicting what percentage. I think Obama will win, but not by a massive percentage. I think Romney will perform better than McCain. That's the impression I get. And I have to say, even though I don't like Romney's politics, the guy looks presidential. I can actually see a President Romney. That doesn't mean I would support a President Romney, but I can see it in a way that I didn't really see with John McCain. That's my sort of outlook. But I would say to American voters, just don't expect these guys to be superhuman. You know, whoever wins, try and appreciate the sheer burden that they have to face. Now, of course, they put themselves into it, so they have to accept that responsibility. But it's impossible for them to please everybody all the time, and that's the same in British prime ministerial debates, prime ministerial contests, French presidential debates, you name it. In democracy, you cannot have a leader who will please everybody all the time, and it's actually healthy that they will not have a mandate from everyone, because you have to have a diverse range of views, and having a leader who not everyone will like actually reflects that diversity of opinions, so it's healthy. I mean, I don't support a lot of the politics of my Prime Minister, David Cameron. I certainly don't support his party, but I respect the fact that we're in a democracy and he has a democratic mandate. And that's how I feel. I do think some of the Republican rhetoric, especially from Fox News, which in my opinion is a joke, that's accusing Obama of being a socialist, a communist, etc., 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 is pretty absurd. By the way, even if he was a socialist, I would remind people that socialism and communism are not the same thing. There's been many democratically elected socialist governments, and if you look at the track record of socialism and communism, there's a lot of hostility between the two ideologies, so they're not one and the same. I'm not a socialist, but I'm just saying it's not one and the same. Anyway, time's about to run up, so that's my conclusion. I'm sure I could add in some more views there, but I don't really have time. So, debate 2, 50-50. I think that's a good point to make comments. I may make a video about the third debate, see what happens. See how it goes. Obama-Romney, US election 2012. That's it.